Hey friends, it's Dimitri with Rubashko Streetwear. Today I want to give you guys some pre-ordering tips. So this is obviously a method a lot of clothing brands use nowadays where they will have the customer pre-order an item and they get the payment up front and the customer has to wait for their items. Now obviously this is a good method if you want to have less cash flow problems and you get paid up front and you can buy the inventory, the correct amount of inventory. However, the biggest downside of this is that customer satisfaction often goes down because the lead times and shipping times to get their product is way too high. And we live in an instant gratification culture. We expect, Amazon-like shipping times or stuff is delivered the next day. That's just kind of something that is in the culture and something that is not going to go away anytime soon. So you really have to be on top of stuff. You have to get your product done right with quality and it has to get shipped out in a timely fashion in order for you to be successful and to have high customer satisfaction. Now, there are a lot of things you can do to make this pre-ordering process go by more smoothly and more professionally. Now, what's happening is that you have these three spheres that you're interacting with and you're juggling with when you're doing a pre-order. You have your customer, your supplier, and your shipping team or your post office. And in each one, there's certain little things that you can do to make this pre-ordering process go better. Now, am I a huge fan of pre-orders? No. Do I try to avoid them as much as I can? Yes, I do. I like to have product up front. I like the customer to be able to buy it, and I like to ship it the same day and it arrives to them in a really fast amount of time. But that is not always the best method, and like I mentioned earlier, you can have cash flow problems, you're stocking inventory, your money's tied up. All sorts of things can happen if that side of the business is not functioning well. So pre-orders is just something that you have to figure out whether or not you want to do it. But anyways, let's get on to this. So the first sphere that you're dealing with is the customer. And what you want to have is good communication. So what do I mean by that? The first step for communication is that the customer needs to know that it's a pre-order. You do not want to put an item on your website and someone buys it and then they're in the dark for 5 weeks because it was a pre-order and they didn't know because you didn't write it. So the way you counteract that is you need to write it in the item description. That's really, really important. I would suggest writing it in the title as well, the product title. So write in parentheses pre-order. They know it's a pre-order from the first click. They get to the product description, they read it, hopefully, and then they'll see it again. So they have at least 2 chances, maybe even in the shipping dialog box. You can also write a pre-order statement there, something like that. Make sure that you post that it's a pre-order on your social media. And that's going to be much better so the customer has an expectation. Now, what you want to do is exceed expectations. How do you do that? So let's say that you expect your pre-order to be done in 2 weeks. Well, instead of writing, it's going to be done in 14 days and that's when it's going to ship out, you can write, so it's instead of 14, it would be better if you wrote 15 to 17 days, for example. The reason why is because you have more margin and more buffer time for any mistakes that happen in manufacturing, in the shipping, in the post office, whatever happens, employees get sick. You need to have a room for margin of error for those situations. Plus, what's going to happen is, let's say that the customer at the most, they're like, oh, it's going to take 17 days. Well, what if it only takes 13 days or actually does take 14 days? Well, it's now arriving earlier to the customer, so they're going to be happier about that. And on top of this number, that number needs to be clearly communicated. So you need to write the lead time or the processing time for the customer in the description. So write, however long it's going to take you to figure that out with your supplier, but you need to write it's going to take, 2 to 4 weeks or 4 to 5 weeks or 4 to 6 weeks. Have that number written down so they have a clear expectation. One thing that you want to do as well is have a good mock-up, or better yet, what you want is a sample. So if you have a sample of the actual product, exactly what it's going to look like, the customer has clear expectations of what they're getting and when they're getting it. They have a rough margin of time. If you are making a mock-up, make sure that you are appropriately sizing the artwork and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of tricky because if you're working on a computer versus printing something in physical space, a lot of times your eyes and brain are not translating that correctly. So make sure that your mock-ups are scaled correctly and you know exactly what that embroidery or what that screen print is going to look and all the sizing is correct. That could be an issue because if you aren't scaling things correctly, the customer might think, let's say that they think a print is really large, but then it's like 3 or 4 inches actually smaller, and that could happen. And they don't like the design anymore because it doesn't look as good. Sometimes designs simply look better, smaller or larger. It really depends on the design. And if you don't get that right in your mock-up, that's going to be not good for the customer and they might not enjoy that. So make sure that you do that. One other thing that you can do is a cheaper price up front. This is something some brands do. It may work for you, it may not work for you. If you are starting your brand out, it's something that you might want to explore. Having a cheaper price up front for a pre-order, it helps sell more stuff right away. And it's also, it kind of brings up customer satisfaction a little bit because the customer knows, hey, maybe I'm going to wait a bit longer for it, but I am getting it at a cheaper price right now rather than still waiting for it. And then when the inventory comes, it's going to be shipped to me faster, but it's going to cost more. So it's a little bit better for the customer and it's better for you as a brand because it incentivizes customers to purchase right away and you get that transaction closed and you get everything pre-ordered and you got everything squared away. So it's nice and you move more inventory that way. One thing that you want to do also, and this one kind of goes in between the supplier and the customer, and there's a lot of those two spheres kind of interact, and that is order slightly more. So why do you want to order slightly more? Whenever you have a batch of clothing, no matter what size, there's almost a guarantee that there's going to be some articles of clothing that have small defects. They might have a tiny hole, they might have a ink smudge on something. So something might be still wearable and you could sell it as like a reject bin item, or it could be a catastrophic failure and it can't be sold. So what could happen is, let's say that you only have 50 units of a t-shirt and that is what you're pre-ordering and all the customers bought it. Well, if you get those 50 t-shirts in and 1 to 3 of them are defective, you're going to be basically axing 1 to 3 customers. Maybe you could save a sale and you can either give it to them for free or give it to them at a discounted rate. But sometimes there are pieces of clothing that are totally defective and you can't sell them. They have like large holes or something like that. I remember one time I got a hoodie. It had burn marks in it, so it was literally falling apart. And obviously I can't sell it to a customer and they wouldn't want that anyways. So that is something that you have to keep in mind because you don't want the customer, let's say that they are waiting 4 to 6 weeks, then you get that batch in and they get axed and they get the defective item and it's like, hey, sorry, but this is that, sorry, we're going to refund you or whatever. But still, that's just going to lead to customer dissatisfaction. What I would do in this case is I would order 1 of each size. So if you have sizes small through 2XL, order 1 small, 1 medium, 1 large, 1 extra large, 1 double XL. So you have 5 extra t-shirts. That is also helpful for people that are returning or exchanging items. You have an extra clothing item to do that with. You have that, obviously, like I said, for the defective item. and let's say you don't have any defective items. You still have those 5 t-shirts, and you probably have, if you sold out of those 50 original t-shirts, you probably have customers still asking for if you have any stock left. So now you have t-shirts that you can sell to them and just get rid of that. You can put those items in a mystery box at the end of the year. You still have those good pieces of clothing that will sell regardless, to anyone. So it's good to order slightly more if you're doing a pre-order. It's kind of important. Now, what do you want to do with the supplier? The biggest one for the supplier is, like the customer, you need to have clear communication. You should ask your supplier, hey, or your screen printer or whatever, you should be like, hey, how long is this going to take, this exact project? And they usually, a lot of times, will give you a lead time. So they're going to say, yeah, this is going to take 2 to 3 weeks. So go off on the longer end of the time scale, and in your head say it's going to take 3 weeks if they say 2 to 3 weeks. And that way you have clear communication with the supplier. They know how long it's going to take. You know how long it's going to take. If you have a supplier overseas versus the US, this one is even more difficult to do a pre-order. A lot of times overseas it will take you usually 1 to 3 months to get products. So that's something that you have to juggle. Whereas with the US one, there's more margin of error that you can play with. So let's say that they are making something for you and they totally have a catastrophic failure. They totally mess up. If the blank and the brand of clothing that you're using isn't made in the US, or they have a large stock in the US, your supplier can easily get items in the next day or in 2 days if they had a catastrophic failure. And this has happened before with some suppliers that I have used. They printed something wrong and they had to totally just stop and then go order more supplies right away in order to get that project done on time. So you have a little bit more leeway with stuff that's made in the US. It's a little bit easier with you. So that's basically kind of the only thing you're really doing with the supplier, is you're going back and forth and you're making sure that you have clear expectations with them. One thing that you might want to do as well is you want to have, if you want a rough estimate of how long projects takes and you have been using a supplier for quite some time, maybe for years already, you can go through your receipts and you can see when you ordered and when you picked up items. Write that on the top of it, like how many days it actually took and what kind of project it was. So let's say a 1 color print, 100 t-shirts. That's going to obviously take a lot less to make and manufacture than a 7 color print and 150 t-shirts, or even still 100 t-shirts with that. So knowing those kind of little details, maybe one project takes 10 days and a more complicated project takes 15 days. Knowing those details and having those metrics with your supplier will be really helpful for you to gauge how long things are going to take. Now we go on to the last part, and that is shipping. So this one is super important. So let's say that it's the day that you get your inventory and stock in, and you know what day it's going to come in. You have that clear expectation, like, oh yeah, it's going to come in on this Monday. You need to have that entire day. Let's say you have a lot of them, that entire day set up for shipping. So set up properly. What I mean by set up properly is make sure those expectations are known to yourself, or if you have a team members, your shipping team. So instead of, let's say that you have employees and they would work for you Monday or Tuesday and they work, maybe 6 hours a day. Well, if you want stuff to get out as soon as it comes in, that's ultimately what you want to do. As soon as the product comes in, you want to get it out the same day. You don't want that the shipping times to be even extended longer and longer than what you already had with the manufacturing times. So what I would do in that situation is I would say, hey guys, can we all get in today and work 10 to 12 hours rather than your normal shift? And maybe you pay them overtime or have other incentives, or you're like, hey, you work only Monday today instead of Monday and Tuesday. Let's get all this out. Let's get this all cleared away. So That is something that you want to do. You really want to coordinate. And who you coordinate with as well is obviously the post office. So the post office might be overwhelmed with orders. And the way that you help with that is you need to have a manifest. So a shipping manifest is a special document that you print where you can load up basically hundreds or dozens of barcodes of that item, and the people at the post office, instead of scanning each item, which takes a while for them, it's more work for them, it's slower to get everything sent out and load onto the truck, they just have to scan one document, and on that document it basically acts as like a blanket scan for all of that product that you're giving to the post office, and then they could load that onto the truck and ship that out across the United States and across the world. So that's something that you could do to help your post office, and that stuff is inevitably going to get out faster. It might take the post office extra day to scan everything and do all that if you just hand off hundreds of orders. One thing that you might want to do is use priority mailers. If you're using a pre-order, this means that it's going to arrive to the customer in 2 to 3 days rather than 4 to 7 days. So this is kind of an average with just normal your own shipping supplies and using USPS Ground. It might take something like this for the United States. If you use priority mailers, you're going to get your packages in 2 to 3 days to the customer, so the shipping time is going to be even shortened. And that's definitely what you want to do with pre-orders. Use priority mailers as much as possible. That might mean that you charge a little bit more for shipping, but it's going to mean that customer satisfaction goes up. And the last thing that you want to do with shipping is stock up. I don't mean literally go out and just buy tons of shipping supplies. What I mean by that is have the appropriate amount that you need. You don't want to be going day to day in your operations using your supplies, and then in 4 weeks you get your inventory and you have to ship all that out. Oh no, I ran out of shipping supplies. I wasn't ready for this. You got to be ready for that. You got to order those supplies ahead so you have your shipping system set up well and you're ready to tackle that huge pre-order. So make sure that you're paying attention to those little details and you have that stuff ready to go. If you do these three things really well, your pre-ordering system is going to go by much smoother. Customer satisfaction is going to go up and it's going to be a lot less stressful. You're going to have less customer emails and hassle. What is required of you though is that you have to be a little bit meticulous and figure out all the little details, and they all are bespoke to you as the viewer. So I don't know what kind of supplier or manufacturer you have. I don't know exactly how your shipping system is set up, but you need to figure that out for yourself. You need to communicate clearly with the customer, with your supplier, and with your post office. And if you do that, you're going to have a lot of success with pre-orders. If you got any value out of this video, or if you have any comments or questions, you can leave them down in the comment section below, and I'll catch you guys later. Thanks.